take sunlight, carbon dioxide, and water, and they turn it into sugar. That's glucose. There'll be a quiz tomorrow, a little recall quiz on this concept, so I assume you're all putting this in your notes, right? Good. So they take sunlight and carbon dioxide and water, and out of that, they give off oxygen and sugar. Sugar is glucose. That sugar they store for themselves. Now, in physical science, you should have had something like this. CO2 plus H2O. Are you in physical science this year? Yeah. Okay. Gives O2 plus C6 H12 O6. That's glucose. That's the general equation for photosynthesis. It's a formula equation for photosynthesis. If there were not plants on this planet performing photosynthesis at all times. Now remember, I said, plants don't care about you. Not to break your heart here.
They care about themselves.
Yeah. They're, you know, on some very fundamental, most living things are in it for themselves. Altruism, doing things for other people without benefit for yourself, is somewhat unusual. Oh, that thing is a nightmare. Is a little bit unusual in biology. So plants are in this for themselves.
What is the top of that thing?
Sunlight. Sorry. Let me make that clearer. CO2 plus H2O.
Equals sunlight.
Not equals sunlight.
How do we put the arrow on note?
I have no idea. I don't use notes.
Sunlight.
The presence of sunlight yields O2 plus C6 H12 O6.
We copy that.
Let me move this all over. Gonna have to shrink it. There we go. And that's the general formula for photosynthesis. Yeah, as I said, plants don't care about you. They're not putting out oxygen, you know, the third grade version. Trees make oxygen for us! No, trees don't make oxygen for you. They poop oxygen. Well, no, they don't belch that out. But yeah, they produce lots and lots of pollen, lots and lots of tree sperm. They don't. No, they don't.
The last theater, is that 6?
Yeah, that's a 6. Yes, sir.
If there's only 3 trees left on the whole entire planet, will we die?
Yeah. Yeah.
And what about 1,000?
Probably. Biosphere too, because it was supposed to replicate the Earth. And they put, I think there were 7 bionauts who went into the dome, and the goal was that they would live there for 1 year without coming out. No food in, no gases in, no nothing went in or out of the dome. That was the idea. So they had to recycle all their own waste. They had to have enough plants in there to provide enough oxygen for them to breathe for an entire year. They had to have enough plants in there to produce, to basically, well, that's what I'm talking about. It was this dome constructed in the desert of Arizona, and it was an experiment. And I think they went about 3 months, and oxygen levels got critically low, and they had to pump oxygen in because they had vastly, you know what they had underestimated?
What?
The bacteria in the soil that were using oxygen.
Oh.
So they didn't factor in soil bacteria. And soil bacteria were using much more oxygen than they had anticipated, and they didn't have enough plant matter to produce enough oxygen to support, because they were growing all their own crops, of course. They had, you know, sort of a miniature forest in there, and they had food plots. But they had to calculate how much oxygen could be produced by the number of plants in there and how much oxygen would be used by the animals, and they got it wrong. So they had to pump in oxygen like 3 or 4 months in. And, you know, it's a pretty staggering equation when you think about it. Yeah, plants don't care about you, but without them we die. Now, if humans went extinct, would plants die? No. Not at all. Huh? Oh, sure they would. from wolves and elephants and bacteria. And if all other living things died, you would not have a whole lot of CO2 in the atmosphere, but they don't need a whole lot of CO2. You would still have some CO2 because you'd have like natural lightning strikes would cause fires and burn down trees, and that releases CO2. You would still have... You done, Jeff?
I'll just stick with my excuse
Did the volcano give us?
Volcanoes produce a little, they outgas a little bit of CO2. Well, who knows? But, you know, geysers, things like that do outgas some CO2. But yeah, without plants, we're toast. We're done. So tomorrow, what you're going to be looking for, the process that you just did up here is called paper chromatography. And that alcohol acts as a solvent. And what happens is when you put a smudge of chlorophyll, because that green all just looks like one color of green, right? A grass stain looks pretty much like one, it looks like a smear of green. What's in there are actually usually a couple different pigments. So in the case of chlorophyll, there are some darker pigments and some lighter pigments. And what you'll start to see is a little dot where the pigment has traveled up the filter. And usually you'll get a yellowish dot and a darker green dot. On the piece of paper that had your red pigment on it, what you're going to be looking for tomorrow, chair down, Jeff, thanks, is smears of green up on the top of the filter paper, halfway up. You're going to look at how far that alcohol has traveled. And basically, if there is green in there, that tells us that there is chlorophyll in that plant, even though the leaves look red. Okay? Tomorrow, we're going to start to talk about sort of the history of plants. We're going to talk a little bit about the evolution of plants. One last thing, I'll have you go ahead and, well, drought. Like things, the first things that did photosynthesis lived in water. So the ones that were able to survive on land were the ones that had a waxy covering or cuticle. So all the plants that we see today have a waxy cuticle.